Thank you everybody for joining in. As we wait for others to join, I will, in the meantime, I'll play the trailer of the documentary film, The Next Guardian.
Te rangi nyembabe, te ya chopera anga nyam chawete ane lesson be mapchak nyam chawete ya kom nane bewoji. Te loktigera hengera te loktigera te langlo nyebatani be.
Amin ko pinano.
Te gringo ta sana.
Ucapan. Gyembo theo một lúc rồi này sẽ ăn vào liền luôn.
Nó bây giờ mà về được quan sát bốc cho mà về. Rồi tôi có gì xí đấy.
Tebeni pero ani kuch kapola pero teni maumbanalo rangi tebeni chela matu lam chopite terang langi kopenalo inde bachin.
Ya Gyembo, sigil na mo sa daan na liu. Ni wala na liu.
Thank you and welcome back. Thanks everybody for joining in. This is Screen Southasia June edition, and this weekend we screened a film from Bhutan, The Next Guardian. And before we begin, I would like our editor, Woman Gautam, to start with a welcome note.
I'll keep it very short and say some very important thank yous. Of course, Alok, as always, thank you. Sana, thank you. And of course, the biggest thank you to everyone who's joining us, and especially to Arun. I think, yeah, what to say about this film? It's so sublimely shot, sublimely edited, sublimely told, humanely told. It's one that really stays with you. It's one of those when it ends, I mean, it ends in a beautiful way, but also ends, it felt so abrupt only because you really want to know what happened next, really what happened next. So I guess now we get a chance to find out what happened next. So I won't say anything more. Thank you all for joining us. I'll leave you with Alok and Sana to lead the way.
Thank you, Roman. I'd like to quickly introduce the filmmakers. Arun is joining us today, but this film is co-directed by Arun Bhattarai and Dorothea Zurbo. Dorothea Zurbo, I'm going to go first with her, is a documentary filmmaker and a university teacher from Hungary. The Next Guardian was their first feature-length documentary film. She graduated from the first edition of Doc Nomad Joint Masters, for which she was awarded full Erasmus funded scholarship in Lisbon, Budapest, and Brussels in 2014. In 2021, she received her DLA diploma from the University of Theatre and Film Arts in Budapest, where she is also a lecturer in the field of transmedia storytelling and experimental documentary. Her second feature, Easy Lessons, a feature-length documentary supported by the incubator program of the Hungarian National Film Fund. The film premiered at the Locarno International Critics Week section in 2018 and participated in more than 40 international festivals. Arun Bhattarai, was also his first documentary film, The Next Guardian, which premiered in competition at ITFA in 2017. Since then, it has screened in more than 40 international film festivals and has had theatrical releases and broadcasted around the world. The film was developed in several international workshops and was supported by international film funds. His most recent television documentary, Kelden, won the Asia Pitch and was screened at NHK World TV, MediaCorp, and KBS Korea. He graduated from the first edition of the DocNomads Joint Masters Program in documentary film directing. His short documentary in development, Mountain Man, is about Bhutan's first glaciologist who won the best won the best pitch prize at the If Then Global Short Film Pitch in 2019. Currently, Arun and Dorothea are developing Rosh National Happiness together as co-directors. The film is supported by the Hungarian National Film Fund, the Sundance Institute, and the Catapult Film Fund. Welcome, Arun. Sana, over to
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Arun. Yeah, to start with, so Arun, how did you meet the protagonists, Tashi and Gyembo, and how did you win their trust to, tell their stories for information?
Well, I think it's just like in many documentaries, you start with something and you reach something else. That's how, like, actually, right after my master's in a program called as DocNomads in Europe, I came back to Bhutan and I wanted to do something with young people, basically like a story about young people. So at that time, they were starting the first professionally trained women team, a football team in Bhutan. So basically, I thought that's a good place to kind of go and search for stories. So I reached this football camp where they were starting the first football team, women football team. And that's where actually I met Tashi first. I hadn't met Gyembo at that time. I only met Tashi. And I spent a few months there and I actually got very close to Tashi because she was very shy, but then she was very sure about her own identity. And from there, during her summer break, I went to the village in Bumthang, which is in central Bhutan. And that's where I met her brother, Gyembo, and the father as well. And what started initially as a sports film, like I wanted to make a film about football, kind of became a film about this family and about generation gap, because I thought that here within the microcosm of this monastery, there was an opportunity to kind of reflect upon changing Bhutan as well as generation gap through the story of Gyembo, Tashi, and the father. So yeah, that's how I kind of reached to this story. But about gaining their trust, I actually spent a lot of time with all of them. Initially, I was at the football academy where I spent about 6 months trying to find a story and trying to find Tashi, and there I became friends with everyone, and that's where we became really good friends with Tashi. And later, at home, I became really good friends with the father and also with the brother, because initially I wasn't actually filming. I was more like gaining their trust, showing them a lot of films, and also kind of telling them this is the kind of film I would like to do, because often usually they are not aware of the creative documentary form. Often when you go with a camera, people think that, oh, you are from a television station and you came for a few days, you just interview them and then you leave. But then it was important for me initially to tell them that I'm going to keep coming back. I'm going to sometimes be here, sometimes live with you, and I need your I need your help, and so we need to be friends, and it should be a very collaborative process. And so I wanted to make sure that it was there right from the beginning. So yeah, so I spent a lot of time with all of them to do this film.
That's fascinating. Thank you, Arun. You touch on so many things there, but I'm gonna. There is a dialogue in the film, and you touch on the generational gap, and that is definitely such a big part of the film. There's dialogue in the film by the father where he says, "Our culture is important. It is the key to happiness." He's influenced by Buddhist philosophy. On the other hand, there are his children and the younger generation for whom happiness would have a completely different meaning. Can you comment on these contrasting views and also like how you portrayed it in film?
Yeah, I mean, for me also it was actually one of the things that struck me when I went there to the eastern part of Bhutan was that because I grew up there, like in actually like not so far from there, about 2 hours away from there. So I studied there. So this I really wanted to reflect on this idea of generation gap, because it's very prevalent. Like in South Asia, usually it's like like the children cannot say no to the parents, and I wanted to show this. That's why there is, like you see in the film, that there is no point where Gyembo actually openly revolts against the father. Like the only way he can do, the biggest way he can revolt is by maybe like dozing off when the father is talking to him about his about his culture. And so, and at the same time, I also understood where the father is coming from as well, like because he's very proud of his culture, and they are in charge of this 1,000-year-old monastery where it has been passed down from like generation to generation. And now here Gyembo is not willing to take over the monastery. At least he's not telling it, but it's pretty obvious that he doesn't want to do it. So yeah, I basically that is what was interesting for me.
So I wanted to talk about the use of the way you've shown the use of TV and smartphone and internet, and how it is being adopted and juxtaposed between the two generations. And Bhutan being one of the last countries in the world to actually legalize the use of cable TV, internet. And so how these themes also sort of capture Bhutan's transition to the digital age. So, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, like Bhutan was the last country in the world to get TV, and actually probably I come from the generation who grew up watching television, like the first one probably. So yeah, it's very interesting because I think the impact is bigger in Bhutan, like the effect of television and mobile phones, generally internet is bigger here because everything came at once here. So especially this generation like Tashi and Gyembo, like they grew up with their phones, and it's also, like when we see like Gyembo look for football tutorials on YouTube, you kind of feel that, oh, he's actually not so different from anyone who grows up in America or Europe or anywhere else in the world. So that way I thought, and also, yeah, in a kind of a subtle way, I wanted to reflect on this contrast between tradition and modernity through these small tools. Like, for example, there is a scene in the film where Gyembo is watching television on this on a TV where there is a frame where it's this traditionally painted frame where the TV is kept, like, so I wanted to really reflect on those things in the film.
So I'm gonna play a clip from the documentary, and then we'll have a little bit.
Thank you, Sana. So there are a lot of cuts like this in the film, like the one we just watched, where you have mixed traditional and modern visuals, and like we just saw the TV frame you were just talking about as well. Some other cuts that I had noted was when the father is dancing to the drum beats, and the same beats are heard as they're practicing the football with kids. And could you talk a little bit more about the editing and the sound designing process? Also, to add to that, because your editor is Hungarian, what was that process like as well?
Yeah, we had a interesting editing process because our editor, he doesn't speak English, so my co-director Dorothea, she was translating it to him often. We had to constantly send footage from here because I was here most of the time shooting. So I was what we were doing is we were shooting here and then getting it translated and then sending it to Hungary. And in Hungary, Dorothea actually kind of translates it to Hungarian for our editor. But it was I think it was a very long and difficult process, but I think it was a really good process because somehow our editor had a lot of distance from the footage, and he could actually he was not as close to the footage as myself and Dorothea, because Dorothea would come here and she was doing the sound, I was doing the camera, so we were so close to everything, and we knew the situations, like what is happening, and sometimes we didn't want to leave out certain footage because we were so emotionally attached to some of the scenes. So it was really good that there was someone who had a really fresh eye watching the film. But actually, the structure of the film itself, it actually came out more during the editing process, because when we set out, and actually I like to work that way, that in documentary I like to start with like really like with an idea, and I go there with an idea and I actually shoot with that like lens, through that lens, and I'm just shooting through that lens, and then when we reach the editing stage, I like to start writing the actual structure. So it's like a opposite of fiction, I would say. So it's like so during the editing process, we actually started to write down the script and stuff, and that's when the story really changed, and it also like came out. Otherwise, before we started the editing, actually the structure of the film, it was not really clear, and but we knew that we wanted to reflect upon changing times in Bhutan. We wanted to reflect upon generation gap, tradition, modernity, using this monastery as the microcosm, using very ordinary everyday situations without big drama, but the drama is usually very like subtle through the film. So that we knew, and that was always there in our head when we were out there shooting and searching for moments with the father, searching for moments with Gyembo, and sometimes Gyembo and Tashi together. That we knew, but we started the first initial editing process for 4 or 5 months, and then we realized that maybe we need to shoot some more. So I came back here, and then we shot for again like few like patching here, up down, like few things, and then we could complete the film. So we kind of shot a little bit after the editing process started as well.
Okay. So I'm going to play one more clip from the film that we wanted to refer to.
Lama apa dia rumah ketinam sini, na nebinik dek 50% sini. Masuk ada kitab Mate mangsura lokte. Tuma logo. So tu ko jisi de. Anto
Yeah. So I wanted to refer to, like how she refers to Tashi's gender expressions. And towards the end also, there is a session where parents directly speak to the camera and sort of talk about what do they think about Tashi's gender expression. So is this kind of thinking common in Bhutan, and in general, how is gender viewed in Bhutan?
So one of the reasons why I really got attracted towards this family was also because how accepting the parents were towards Tashi's identity, actually, because this interview that you see in the film, actually it's actually a research interview. It was the first interview we actually did with three of them, and it wasn't even meant to be part of the film initially. We just wanted to hear their thoughts, and we were still trying to figure out whether this family can be a part of the film or not. So so we are just that's how we work, that we kind of interview them just to see how they express themselves, how are they on camera. It's kind of in some way like a casting, let's say. So I started to ask them question about Tashi, to ask them what they think about Tashi's identity, and then the father said that he must have been a boy in his previous life. That's why he's like this, and he was so accepting of his identity in front of us, but in everyday life, in everyday situations, and he would refer to Tashi as he as well. So it was, so for me that was very interesting, which is not very common in Bhutan, actually. But this really came from the father's Buddhist beliefs, because he's caretaker of this monastery, and he was actually practicing his own Buddhism. And then but what was interesting for me was that he was so accepting of Tashi, but then he wasn't so accepting of Gyembo when Gyembo wanted to go and play football. So I thought that if it was in another part of the world, maybe it would have been the complete opposite, So but this family itself, they were unique because they were very, very accepting. Generally, all in Bhutan, you see that they use their Buddhist values to interpret their everyday reality, and you do see a lot of families like accepting of transgender people by saying that this is just like how you are born, that this is because of your past life. So that you do see in Bhutan, but especially in this case, this family, they were like really like very accepting. Sometimes when we go around the village, we would see like there was no open discrimination towards Tashi, but sometimes they would make comments, like for example, when Tashi and Gyembo are in the archery match playing, and then someone makes comments about Tashi's hair, like those kind of comments you see. And when I was growing up also, at least in schools and all, I have seen some form of discrimination towards transgender people. It's not really like open, but there is discrimination. But this was a very special family.
Indeed. Sorry, Sana.
No, go on.
Okay. Yeah, this is a unique family also because what you were talking about earlier about how they're the typical South Asian expectation that's there, but so is this like wonderful acceptance of who Tashi is, and I found that like the existence of both really beautiful. The film does not follow traditional talking heads at all, and it's entirely observational. And which really allows us to character what the characters are thinking by looking at the activities and the conversations. And it's such an observant film. How did you approach the camera work, and like where were you when you were shooting? In many ways.
Mm-hmm. So usually I like Actually, I mean, most of the time, I like to be alone on set. Actually, I like to go there. I do the sound and I do the camera as well, like most of the time. And somehow I feel very comfortable doing it. It's a lot of sound post-production work later on, but but it's worth it in the sense that you really tend to get like some moments that you would never get if you were a bigger group or bigger group, because I spend so much time with the family, almost being a part of like almost being their family member. Like we released the film in 2017 and I'm in touch with them right now also. Like we keep on talking, we chat all the time. So I became a part of the family, and sometimes you bring someone else on set and then the whole dynamic changes. So also after spending a lot of time with the family, you also kind of realize where you need to place yourself, like, because you kind of understand the rhythm of life there. You know that, okay, at this time the father is going to go to pray, at this time he's going to bring Gyembo here and he's going to teach, and it's a very repetitive process. Like for example, Gyembo and Tashi, like on the phone in the bed, it used to happen almost every other night. Like you see them on the bed, like talking, chatting, talking about girls. So I would just need to go and stay there. Initially, it was uncomfortable for them, but then slowly I kind of told them that, oh, this is important for the film. So it was really, and also sometimes it's also about just staying with the camera and waiting for things to happen. And I think if you wait enough, then you get what you want often, because sometimes if you like for one scene you wait for over an hour just waiting, and that something interesting is going to happen, so you just place yourself. And here I really wanted to work with more composed kind of frames without moving the camera too much as well. So it was more difficult to get this kind of scenes. That's why I really needed to wait, because somehow through the camera work, I wanted to reflect on the rhythm of life in Bhutan itself, like the time, because everything is a little bit slow here, everything is a little bit repetitive here. So that's why I wanted to kind of intentionally show this repetition and this passing of time in the film.
Thanks, Arun. So for those who want to ask questions, you can also unmute yourself and ask questions directly with Arun, or you can put in your questions in the chat and we will take it. So in one of the interviews online, I was reading about you and Dorotho. It mentioned that you showed the film to the father, and after seeing the film, he sort of postponed Gyembo's admission to the monk school. So could you talk about that, and also in general, like how did the audience in Bhutan react to the film?
Yeah. So yeah, we showed the film to the family, and it was very interesting because like they really enjoyed it, but there were also really a lot of awkward moments, I think, for the parents, because they are watching the kids talk about girlfriends on the phone and stuff like that as well. And actually yeah, I mean, after watching the film, the father always reflects about like like his dream of sending Gyembo to the monastery and seeing that he becomes the next guardian of the monastery. And he used to tell that to me always. So actually, after watching the film, he seemed to, at that time, he seemed to change his mind a little bit. So he actually let Gyembo. Gyembo was at that time in his I think he was in his 11th grade or something like that. He actually let Gyembo finish through high school, and I feel like it was also one of the kind of, not only the watching the film at that moment, but it was also because he spent so much time with me, the crew, all of us talking about Gyembo's future. And I think that kind of made him change his mind a little bit. Yeah.
And how did, like, in general, audience in Bhutan react to the film?
Oh, yeah, I think it was very interesting because it's one of the few creative documentaries that came out of Bhutan. There are very few independent filmmakers here, and even fewer documentary filmmakers here. Most of the films that we see are from BBS, which is like the local television channel here. Most of the documentaries, so they are a little bit different. They are more informational. Let's say they are more journalistic. So actually, this was one of the few, like, first creative documentaries from the country. So it was actually, we had a very good reaction. We screened it here in the cinemas, and it was the first time that people were watching a documentary in a cinema here. So, and people kind of could really relate to the film a lot. And we actually screened it to a lot of young people in different high schools. We had some kind of traveling cinema. We took our own projection and our own equipment, and we hiked up the mountains, showing it to different communities to kind of talk about the themes in the film. And we actually got some really interesting reactions, both from parents in the villages to youngsters also. And often the young people would say that I can really relate to Gyembo, and sometimes we'd hear a lot of older people saying that, oh, the father is right. So we had some actually, but generally the audiences were very receptive here.
Thank you. So one of the participants, Shujan Pandey, wants to ask a question. Shujan?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
First off, amazing movie. I watched it with my mom and she loved it as well. Like, especially the scene when, the father and the son, they're dancing together and, he's awkwardly dancing, but he's, enjoying at the same time. I was curious about this, the structure of the film itself, in a sense that it has a very documentary approach to the movie as well, but a lot of things, it also looks scripted, right? I love how you blur the line in between these two and push the narrative all together. How do you do this? Like, what's the process like? Is there a specific approach that you take? What's the process like in general?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, actually. It's more like the structure itself. It came out during the editing. So while we were filming, of course, I didn't want to do a like a traditional documentary. I really wanted to do something which has a kind of a narrative arc, almost like a fiction. And I knew that if I spend enough time with the family, there is even if there is no huge big drama in the film, there is always this subtle drama which we can integrate inside the film. All about where we put the drama in the structure, and I knew that we can figure out during the team itself. And a lot of the structure, it like the moments, like everything is actually it's real, because I was there, I was waiting. Obviously when Tashi and Gyembo go towards the river, they do that almost every evening. Sometimes I would tell them, hey, let's go to the river, and then I just follow them. They sit on the rock, and then I just film and then wait for them to talk. And sometimes, like 90% of the time, the footage is really bad because they don't talk what you want. But then at the same time, sometimes if you know what they usually talk, I give them like little pointers. Why didn't you talk about this? And then they talk about that. And then initially it's really not natural. But then after some time, because they talk about it all the time, they forget about the camera. And then it becomes really natural. So it was that kind of I really improvised during the shooting. Like, it was very like I was improvising all the time. Just while they are on location, I kind of give them small cues to talk about this, talk about that. So that was the shooting process. But the structure itself, it really came out during the editing. And then during the editing, we realized that we don't have a strong ending. I mean, we had that scene where they were climbing the rock. We already had that, and we knew that we wanted that to be the end of the film, but we didn't have something before that, because till that point, the father hadn't taken Gyembo to the monastery. So I came back to the shooting, and then I talked to the father, and I was like telling him, when are you going to take him to the monastery? And then he's like, okay, let's go tomorrow. So so that's how I went with the father, and we filmed that. So I think it's like all about kind of filming things that would happen in the future, or filming things that happen other times but won't happen in front of the camera. So it's a balance between the two. And then I think the structure, usually I normally don't like to think about the structure during the shooting process. Usually it comes out during the editing for me.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Sritin. That would have been a good ending, like with that rock shot, because there's a dialogue where Tashi says, "You will go to hell if you don't become a monk."
Yes.
So you were talking about the filmmaking and how difficult it is to make films in Bhutan. And lately, like couple of films like Lunaka, Yak and the Craftsman, or The Cup, which is on movie as well. Like, so they sort of like were sort of screened on international platforms. But like, how much do you think has changed in the past few years in terms of funding that you get for films, all the filmmaking process in terms of?
So here in Bhutan, actually, nothing has changed. Actually, it's like we had one film that got nominated for the Oscars, but even that also didn't change anything for the Bhutanese cinema itself, because we don't really have support for the arts here, any kind of arts, like including filmmaking. And the market itself is also so small, because our population is so small. It's very difficult even for commercial filmmakers. So for me, I had to, that is one of the reasons, because I studied in Hungary, it was easier to find a producer from Hungary for the Next Guardian. So that's how she helped me to raise the funds. And also I really applied to a lot of art foundations. There is the ITFA Bertha Fund, which is a very important fund, I think, for developing countries. So we had funding for development, for production, post-production from this ITFA Bertha Fund. Like most of the fund for this film actually came from there, and part of the fund came from our Hungarian producer. So the sad thing is that we all the time have to rely on having producers from Europe or the US. I think it's the same for most independent filmmakers in South Asia, actually. So that kind of, it was not a problem for me creatively, but sometimes it can be a problem because you can't really tell your own authentic stories, because then every time you have to worry that, oh, is this film relatable to somebody in Europe? Like because I think the first priority should be, is it relatable to someone in Bhutan? But usually it's the opposite because of this.
That's true, and you notice that in so many markets as well. I'm curious, as as part of Film South Asia, you said nothing has changed, but are there new creative documentary filmmakers coming out of Bhutan at all? And is there a community that's growing a little bit, or is just you at the moment? Also, because we are always looking for films from Bhutan to screen for our festivals.
We have a few independent fiction filmmakers. I mean, we have, but for documentaries, at the moment, I think even the younger people who kind of enter into filmmaking, I think they start with fiction because that's their interest, I think. And hopefully gradually they will move towards documentary at some point. But making like creative documentaries, I think right now it's just me actually. Obviously, like we have directing. I mean, I involve a lot of local crew, and I have sound people, and even editing and everything. I involve like. I was also teaching here at the university here, so right now I'm also involved in some of my students as well. So, right now, like for creative documentary, yeah, no, it's not.
Wow. Okay.
It's just me. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
good to know, though, and I will keep in touch as we, for our next festival. I'm sure, like, we'll ask you about your film development in a little bit as well.
Sure.
I have a question about, there's a lot of stress by the father that only a male can lead the monastery. And not that there's any indication that Tashi would be interested, but have things changed now? And are there any female nuns and female leadership in monasteries in Bhutan?
They still no. I don't know any monastery. So this is a private monastery, and very few private monasteries are left right now in Bhutan because of this is same issue where the son doesn't want to take over the monastery anymore. And then what happens is eventually the government takes over the monastery. So this is also a case of where the family property gets taken over by the monastery for the father. But right now, obviously, the father is still there. He still has the monastery, but this was also one of his problems. So, but we have a lot of nuns, but there are no. I don't know any women who are taking over like monastery. I don't know. Actually, the father was very open to the idea of Tashi taking over the monastery also at some point. But then I think it would have been problematic for the community itself there. So that's why it didn't go ahead.
Thanks, Arun. I think Srijan has another question.
Thank you, Ken. Since you mentioned that you also worked on the camera work in the film, I was interested a bit about the cinematography of the film as well, because I noticed that you used a lot of static wide-angle shots in order to not only show the monastery, but also the father dancing, Tashi going around, Gyembo going around and everything, right? Does it have any specific meaning to, like, beyond showing the place and everything? Does it have any other symbolic meaning or any other cinematographic technique that you use throughout the movie?
It was firstly, it's actually that's usually my style. That's how I shoot any film, like most films, and it's somehow suited to this film as well. So I thought that it's one thing we didn't really want to use movement in the film that we were very sure of. We wanted to use like mostly wide shots. It was basically the kind of show the rhythm of life here. It was to show the rhythm of life here, basically, and also it kind of matched with the repetitive routine that we wanted to show that happens in rural Bhutan. That was the reason.
Thank you.
Thanks, Srijan. So, are you in touch with Tashi and Gyembo, and like, is there any, like, if you're thinking of a project of them following them?
Yeah, so there is good news and bad news. So basically, I'm in touch with the two of them. For last 2 years, Gyembo completely disappeared and he wasn't talking to me, and I was wondering what happened. But then I realized recently, about a year ago, that the father actually sent him to the monastery. So he's in the monastery right now. Maybe like he has maybe like 2 more years. Then I think he'll be done from the monastery. So he left his high school and he's in the monastery right now, the same monastery where the father takes him in the end of the film. And Tashi is now she couldn't get back to football, so she's now in the table tennis, like the ping pong team, the national team ping pong. So she's plays that, and then she's also kind of she's studying right now. She's in college.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I would love a follow-up to this film. Last question. I mentioned Gross National Happiness, the film you're currently working on. Could you tell us a little bit
Yes.
about that?
So I'm also co-directing this film with Dorothea because we have a really great working relationship, and somehow she has the outsider perspective and I have the local view, and it works really well together. This film it's actually about a happiness agent who goes around Bhutan doing the happiness survey. So through this happiness agent who works for the happiness department of Bhutan, like he works for them, and then through him we meet different people. So it's like a kind of a mosaic of different stories through this happiness agent who goes on a road trip with his best buddy, who is also a happiness agent, and then he himself is unhappy. Basically, he himself, the happiness agent himself, is desperate to get married, basically. So that's the story. It's kind of satire, kind of bittersweet.
It's a documentary that.
Yes,
sorry,
it's a
please
documentary.
carry on.
Yeah, it's a documentary, and we were following him already for the last 3 years, and we are also reaching the editing stage for this film as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Arun.
Cool.
Sounds interesting.
So, can we possibly expect it around next year? Because FSA is fall 2024. Just want to plug that in. I will be sending you an email about that.
Would be nice. I'll definitely share it with you, of course.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sana? Thanks, Arun. Thanks, Alok. So, that was the last question. We'll end our session now. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and thank you, Arun, for making time. Like, really learned a lot from you. Recording of this session, with transcripts will be shared on Himal and Southasian social media channels soon. And we will be back next month with a new documentary from South Asia. And follow Himal Southasian and Film Southasian for more updates. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.